Hello and a very warm welcome to F1 Nation.
Tom, you've just got back. You've been queuing up at the airport. They won't let you back in the country, or you got back in just by the nick of the skin of your teeth or whatever it is. Natalie and I were stranded in Britain while we had to watch the fantastic Baku Grand Prix. From the comfort of our living room. I don't know where Natalie was. I think she may have been somewhere else, a sandy place maybe.
Amber Sands, yes. Lapping up the great British sunshine.
I can't work out, Damon, whether you're pleased to see me or not after that intro, quite frankly.
Well, I'm pleased you're back safe. I mean, you know, you had travelling all night and everything.
He looks a bit weary, doesn't he?
He's a bit weary. Do you know, I've just got off what I call the zoo flight. You know, the charter flights that come back from races and they're full of Formula One people, absolutely rammed. Everyone's knackered, asleep, still smell of Formula One, and that's me. And
B.O.
B.O. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, middle seat for me today as well. So.
And also, oh, God, the middle seat, that damn middle seat. But also, I always find on those flights, you can't work out if you're tired, overtired, hungry, thirsty, whether you want a beer or don't want a beer. You're just in this sort of no man's land and you're trying to sort of come down from actually what was an epic weekend of racing.
Sergio Perez wins the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel moved teams. He picks up his first podium for Aston Martin and their first podium in Formula One. Pierre Gasly's back on the podium too for AlphaTauri as he comes home third.
And I'm now in a meeting room at Heathrow. Do you remember back in the days of Bernie and Max, Fisa, Foka, and all, they were always plotting and having little secret meetings.
You've been through the dustbins, haven't you, for other people's notes?
And they have all these meetings at Heathrow, right? All the, you know, people flying in from Ferrari and Sauber and all these different places to have meetings with Bernie and Max at Heathrow. Well, all I can say is I hope it was a more glamorous location than where I'm sat right now. I have got a cup of coffee. I thought there were going to be biscuits.
You're a travelling man, Tom. I mean, you signed up for this.
I was going to say, you don't get any sympathy from us.
I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just imagining what it was like in the Bernie and Max era.
But you were actually there in Baku, and a bit of an odd one because they didn't have anyone coming. You know, there was no fans in the compound at all. It was all sort of isolated from the outside world, I believe. You've got Baku going on in the background. You can see people looking out of the balconies. There's some people obviously enjoying it. There's some apartment blocks. There's people getting very excited. People on rooftops.
Hey,
so there was some interest.
As Pinks was just saying, it was a fabulous weekend. But it's funny you should mention people looking on balconies because it's the first race we've had behind closed doors, which is what we've been doing for the last 18 months, where there were no grandstands, because we've always been at permanent tracks, and obviously they have grandstands, but they've been empty. So it's given it a very sort of naked feel, but they didn't even, because this is a street track, they didn't even bother building the grandstands, and it gave it a very different feel. It felt busier because you didn't have these sort of open front, just gaping holes by the side of the track with nothing in them. And as a result, there was a really good vibe all weekend, I must say. So
when it comes to the start, I mean, with no one around, I mean, is it there's no noise? I mean, there's no people, there's no excitement at all, is there? I mean, is there, apart from, I mean, on TV we don't notice it, I suppose, because we can't get the vibe. But there's not the crowds, the kind of intake of breath and all.
Well, we haven't had the crowd for the last goodness knows how long, have we? But
well, we did in Monaco. I thought there was quite a good atmosphere there.
I think Monaco's different though, isn't it? With the boats in the harbour, and it's an individual atmosphere.
There are no yellow flags in Monaco. That's one thing. That's one difference we've established anyway.
Yeah, but
I mean, that we had, what was it, most yellow flags? I think they were in competition. A lot of people were competing over qualifying as to whether or not this was the most red flags, actually, not yellow flags. There was no yellow flags in the race in Monaco, but there were more red flags than any other race bar Hungary, some other. Tom, you've got the statistics. Qualifying, what was more red flags or more stoppages, wasn't it, than any other qualifying session?
It was mad, wasn't it? We had 4 red flags, and I mean, it's a funny thing. It's funny you should bring Monaco up. We have 2 street tracks. One of them, there's absolutely no drama at all in the race, as you say, no yellow flags, and yet drama throughout Baku, and they're both street tracks. And I've been trying to work out why on one track the drivers are driving within themselves so much, and at other tracks they're just not seeing it, and they're just hitting the barrier the whole time. I guess it's got something to do with not running maximum downforce in Baku, whereas you're fully loaded up in Monaco, aren't you? So the car's got more grip, but it's an extraordinary thing, isn't it?
There was an interview we had with Daniel Kvyat, who was a reserve driver, I think, for Alpine. Is that right? And he was saying about
Damon,
Baku,
friend of the show, Daniel Kvyat.
Good. I mean, so
super sub off the bench when you couldn't make it.
Well, I missed that one. Beg pardon.
Oh, well, clearly it worked. Yeah. Oh, right. So because you're not on it, you don't listen. That kind of team player,
we'll cut that bit out.
Right.
We can edit that out. Anyway, so Danny, of course, friend of the show, much love, Danny Kvyat, who also revealed that he thought Baku required courage. And I thought, if Daniel Kvyat says it needs courage to drive around Baku, it does need courage. And I think... Oh my! I mean, it is. They're doing, what was the maximum speed? It's I'd heard a number of 340k or something was recorded at some point. I think one of the races.
The fastest ever speed down that straight was Valtteri Bottas 2016, 378 kph is 235.
That's not
mph.
Really?
On a street track.
Yeah, that's a bit scary, isn't it? I mean, you have to say,
Kvyat's
I wouldn't want my
right.
tyre blowing at 200 and whatever it is, 20. I mean, we just had Indianapolis where they're going round regularly at 220, but these guys are going down a street circuit, and when the tyre blows, those incidents were quite scary, weren't they? Lance Stroll he went left into the wall, Max went right, and but if Max had gone left, there's the end of the pit lane entry wall, which would have been a much heavier impact. So I think we got away a bit lightly there, or a bit luckily. And they're still investigating what caused it all. We don't know. I mean, I've got some speculations, but I'm sure everyone does. But
well, Pirelli have said that they believe it was debris, and because actually the left rear is not the most stressed tyre on that particular circuit, that wear is endured on the front right. And as you say, more analysis will come, but that's their initial findings. And I mean, on the one hand, I don't want a race to be determined by a tyre blowout. On the other hand, it was very dramatic and exciting, wasn't it? And it made for an incredible podium. I mean, I'm all for Max Verstappen taking the win that he deserves. But when you see that Bottas, Hamilton and Verstappen, it's the first time none of them had scored any points since 2013.
Catastrophe. I mean, for them, that's a huge catastrophe.
Yeah. Catastrophe for them, but actually thrilling for the fans to see a podium with Perez, Vettel. Let's come to that in a minute. And of course, Gasly. I mean, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, it was full of action. That's what we like. And the Formula One history of, incidents like that. I mean, I'm thinking of Adelaide with Nigel Mansell's dramatic tyre blowout that cost him the World Championship. Colossally, it's Mansell was the famous term that Murray used. So, but colossally, it was Max Verstappen, sadly, for Max Verstappen this time. So it cost him a Grand Prix victory.
And you know what? Do you know who I blame? Paul di Resta. Commentator's curse.
Oh, what did he say?
He said something along the lines of, he'll no doubt give me a call now to correct me, but it was something along the lines of, with like three or four laps to go. Well, I don't want to jinx this, but he has just been extraordinary. Everything under control. What a brilliant race. Actually, all of that is still true. But moments later, the tyre went.
Until that moment, until Max's tyre went, it had been one of the quieter Baku, Azerbaijan Grand Prix that we'd had. Do you remember 2016? There was a mad Formula 2 race prior to the F1 race.
And we were predicting madness in F1 and it never came.
Weren't we?
Yeah,
people changing flights, thinking we're never going to get out of here tonight because of the race and all the protests and everything after the race. Incredibly quiet. And actually, there'd been about 30 laps of not much going on. Everyone in a DRS train, so they weren't getting the pass down that long straight, even at 378/235 mph. And but then, bam! It all came alive, and I don't know. I loved those last 2 laps. Where were you guys on should they have just finished the race behind the safety car? Were they right to stop it? Were they right to restart it? I love the fact they restarted.
Yeah, it's got to be a standing start. I mean, you just cannot have a Formula One race finishing behind a safety car. We've seen that, and it's a pretty dull anticlimax. So that was brilliant. We got more bang for our bucks. 2 race starts, and of course this is a real good warm-up, a kind of suggestion of what it might be like when it comes to Silverstone when they have the new qualifying race. What is the correct term to call it? It's the pre-race to the main race that's going to define the grid. So, and I think nowadays with the cost caps as well, they really are. I mean, there was quite a bit of damage there at Baku, and that now we're starting to count the cost. And when I was racing, you could smash things up. No one ever said, do you know how much that cost? I was waiting for a bill, but I never came, thank God, because I'd be bankrupt. But, nowadays they really are adding it up, because that's £100,000, if you don't mind, off my budget for next year.
And another thing they're adding up are points lost, because that's not the Mercedes we know and love. And actually, I think by getting too distracted by the tyre blowouts, fails to address the point that actually they just weren't competitive enough in either Monaco or in Baku by their own very high standards. And actually, I quite like the quote from Toto, which said, "We need to transform this anger into a positive force."
Yeah.
And he was quite a lot of fighting talk. He said, "We're going to come out better from this," but that simply wasn't a strong enough weekend, was it?
So guys, it's time for one of our favourite ads on the show. Who are we talking about?
It's Manscaped.
It is indeed, Pinks. Now, Father's Day is just around the corner, and nothing says, "I love you, Dad," more than a world-class trimmer for his body hair. You heard that right. The Lawnmower 3.0 from Manscaped is the best body hair trimmer on the market. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. And you can get 20% off and free shipping with the code F1Nation at manscaped.com.
It's incredible that you did that in one take. TC, what I want to know is, does it bring those stray, wayward, errant eyebrows under control? Because I'm not going to... I don't want to think about the rest of my dad's body hair because that's just weird. But he does have really wild eyebrows.
You need that lawnmower thing they use, don't they? That trimmer thing. You could just set it on a high setting and then just have a quick whiz over your eyebrows.
DH, what you are talking about is the Weed Whacker. It's their ear and nose hair trimmer.
So it's a weed whacker, and it basically gets rid of all that kind of growth that accrues with age.
Yeah, and I reckon it would trim that.
Or maturity, or whatever it is, machismo.
I think it would trim that beard of yours as well. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. And use the code F1Nation.
Damon, I want to know your take on this button that Lewis
not the Jensen button,
pushed.
the other button. You're talking about the magic brake button.
Perez on pole, Hamilton alongside him on the front row. Perez gets away well, Hamilton will wheel spin. Perez tried to cut off Hamilton, who locks up and goes straight on. And Hamilton has gone from second in the race to falling out of the points.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys.
Yeah, don't sweat it, Lewis, don't sweat it.
Did I have the magic on?
Yeah, bud, yeah, just knock that off.
I could have sworn I turned it off.
Yeah, you did, but knocked it on with the upshift.
How can it be that easy to do?
When I was racing, Natalie, we only had about 4 buttons, and it was still quite easy to press the wrong one. So, I mean, now they have and if you do a little sudden move, I should imagine it's quite easy to get. I mean, I thought we're gonna mention Perez because he won the race, didn't he? He did a fantastic job, but on the restart, he really made Lewis jump. And I was surprised by how aggressive, and I think Lewis was probably really surprised by how aggressive Perez was going to defend. And it's quite easy to imagine that, in his quick reaction, it was possible for him to flick a button or, and that's clearly what happened. He's gone in deep, and the brakes weren't working.
Well, Damon, I was just trying to work out the sort of chronology of when he pressed this button, because he was sat on the grid all his brakes were smoking, weren't they? So he'd clearly been using that button on his way to the grid to warm up the brakes.
Your keen journalistic brain is going into overdrive, Tom.
Well, hang on, guys, tell me, but if I've got this wrong, he'd obviously been using it, and to me it smacks of him just forgetting to turn it off, because that button needs repositioning if it's that easy.
Well, that's
to flick
my point.
it on. I know I heard you say it, Pinks.
Yeah,
but
I don't. Yeah.
So I think it must be a
how
way.
it could be that easy for a multiple world champion just to, saying that he's taking evasive action from Perez, that he just accidentally knocks his button. I mean, how can that be?
Well, we've got onboard cameras, haven't we? And I think that Anthony went through it on the coverage I was watching, and I couldn't quite see it. And of course, Anthony is slightly compromised because he does work for Mercedes as a simulator driver. So I don't think you want to be critical, but I didn't see quite where Lewis turned a button on or off. But they have a no-blame culture, as we know in Mercedes. So he can't blame the team and they can't blame him. So we might never find out.
Yeah, maybe I'm being unfair, but I think he just forgot to turn the system off. That's what it smacks of, doesn't it?
Yeah, so what it means is, well, just to explain to the listeners who I'm sure they all understand this principle, but when you're on a warm-up lap, it's easy to get heat into the rear tyres because you've got 1,000 brake horsepower. You can just give it a blat of throttle and that warms up. But the fronts are more difficult. So they turn this bias towards the front. So the front brakes get really cooking hot, which you can see the smoke pouring off. And that goes into the wheel and that warms up the tyre. And that would be a good device to do on a lap, but not during the race because you need the brakes to be working front and rear, not just fronts. So it's like a front handbrake in a way.
I think what you're saying, Damon, is DCTC has cracked the case.
Yeah. Exactly. I think we're slightly suspicious as to what actually caused. I mean, it's very easy to do. I can remember we had a strategy button that was a start strategy button in Jordan, and you were supposed to remember to turn it off after the first lap, and I forgot. And then it went into default mode, which meant shut the engine down, and then Pedro Diniz went over the top of me. So yeah, you can forget.
Whether Lewis forgot to turn the button off or whether he accidentally put it on, I think what's becoming clear this year is that he is making more mistakes than he has done in however many previous seasons that we've been witnessing. You've got the Imola mistake, there's this. I mean, I cast my mind back to the Bahrain test as well and him crunching across the gravel, having thrown it off. It's just, there are mistakes creeping in. You can't, that is a fact.
Well, you only make them when the pressure's on, don't you?
Exactly, Natalie. I think that's the point. We're seeing now Mercedes having stress fractures. We're seeing them being put to the test by a competition which is quite, obviously hotting up, and particularly at Baku, it showed that the Red Bull had speed and it had cornering power and it had all sorts of good things about it, and they were having trouble getting their tyres warm, and coming off the back of Monaco where at least Lewis didn't have such a great race, and so they are, they know they're going to have to fight, and I think they've put all of their resources into the next year's car. I think they may have not as pushed as hard on this car as they need to, given that the competition is going to. So I think they're going to be fighting a battle on two fronts with next year's regulations development, and now having to up their game a little bit on this year's car to keep the championship. Because I think,
well, DH, to be fair, Red Bull have got to fight those two battles as well on those fronts, haven't they?
I think Red Bull will do, and I think that they are I think they're an opportunist team, and I think they know this is a chance for a championship. And I think they know that if Mercedes slightly take their eye off the ball, they could slide in there with a more competitive car than they've had. And one of the reasons I think this, Tom, is because I was listening to your Beyond the Grid podcast with the Brackley boys, and that was very interesting indeed. And I think it was basically they talked about one of the seasons they decided they weren't going to develop the car anymore, and they piled everything they had into next year's car, which is of course I think it was the car that Button won with. So yeah, I think that it was actually the transfer. It was transferring from the pre-hybrid era to the hybrid era. So I think it was one of those junctures. Anyway, they decided to forget this year and focus on next year. And I don't wonder if that's a strategy that they've adopted too soon for 2021.
Well, except, guys, I think the mistakes now are operational. Not anything to do with the development of the car. They've still got a really, really quick car.
Yeah, but it's where your focus is, isn't it? You know, we talk about this laser focus required. A slightly different take on it is I was quite interested how Lewis came into the weekend off the back foot and sort of came good. I mean, really looked like he was going to win the race, or at least take a podium, having sort of really struggled. And then obviously Bottas just sort of faded behind him. I think if he had got a result in Baku this weekend, he would have felt a massive sense of achievement because, again, the chips were down and he was able to fight back. So it was just quite interesting that these sort of shifting mindsets and constantly adapting to the challenges.
I think it's great to see this because I think we're now seeing, we will see the best of Lewis, and I think we'll see the best of Mercedes. And I think that, I think that, it wasn't so long ago we were talking about Max making mistakes and costing himself points as well. So, it gets more like that when you have closer competition, especially between two teams. I think that you see people, their weak spots being exposed because they are under more pressure. So this is great for us, great entertainment. It's a really alive championship. It really is. I think we're going to be...
And you see the roller coaster weekend, even for Max, his frustrations after quali was red flagged, because he believed he would have gone better. And same for Perez. And then, to be sort of dominating the way he was, to then get that tyre blowout.
Yeah, I mean, what a roller coaster. But Pinks, it's interesting you mention Bottas because, what did he? He qualified 10th and finished well down the order just in front of George Russell in the race, didn't he? And Mercedes need him firing on all cylinders if they're going to genuinely take the fight to Red Bull. Not only in terms of points for the Constructors' Championship, but in terms of when they're struggling like they were after Friday practice or during Friday practice here in Baku. They need both cars giving them answers because they tried, I think they threw the kitchen sink at a new way of getting heat into the tyres. They'd struggled in Monaco heating up the tyres. They tried something different in Baku, and it didn't work. And Bottas just never really turned up this weekend, and therefore they're suddenly becoming a one-car team competing against an increasingly functional two-car team at Red Bull. So they need to sort the Bottas situation out, as well as keeping Lewis at the top of his game. And
how long have we been saying that about Red Bull? And look, finally, Perez seems to have come good.
Bang on.
And it does make a difference, massive difference.
From the moment Bottas's private plane went technical in Helsinki and he turned up late, he didn't get to Baku until 7 p.m. on Thursday. And for a reference, I think most drivers try and be there by lunchtime. So if you do a track walk, you miss the track walk. He missed one of his engineering briefings and he was on the back foot throughout and never, ever got going.
Yeah, I always play better golf if I turn up late.
Because you don't have time to think about it.
The thing is, you got so much adrenaline. You're kind of going, you're kind of going, come on, guys, let's go. Where are we going? And I'm not sure about turning up late being a bad thing. I think. I
wondered how long it was going to take us to get onto golf.
I've slipped it in, so I slid it in there. But
well done.
So I mean, but Valtteri, Valtteri, if the car has not been performing, then and Mercedes have got a problem. You can see Lewis's talent kind of sees them through a bit. And, Valtteri now has got, because it was such a close qualifying, there was only, how was it, front to back, it was about 0.6 of a second to 10th place or something. It was very tight on time. So now you've got a lot of cars that can slide in between him and Lewis.
Before we move on from our fantastic Finn, random fact that I learnt at the weekend is Yuri Vips is the Red Bull young driver, and he won. Pinks, you and I have both got a foot in Formula 2. I'm just updating you here. Yuri Vips won 2 of the 3 Formula 2 races over the weekend. And he was stood on top of the podium after his first win. And I thought, God, I really recognise that national anthem. But he's Estonian, by the way. I thought, I've never heard the Estonian. Why don't I know that? Anyway, so I asked him after, I said, that's weird. I really reckon, did they play the wrong national anthem? And he said, no. Estonia and Finland have exactly the same national anthems, just the words are different.
Okay, brilliant.
There you go.
That is
I thought it was important
fact.
and you needed to know that. That's a good pub fact, isn't it?
I like that.
Well done, Sergio! Well done. Thank you for finishing that off for us. Great job.
This is for you guys.
The great Sergio Perez, he's up to speed. I mean, what a great weekend. I mean, he's coming on strong, and I love seeing him interviewed. He's so calm, he's so laid back, doesn't really get too overexcited about anything. He's very laid back, he knows his job, and he's chipping away. He got a big hug from Max at the end of the race.
Well, he's a man of his word, isn't he? He said pre-season it was going to take him 5 races to get up to speed, and bang, race 6, he wins. You can't do better than that.
Oh, spot on with his predictions. I think Perez, I mean, I'm going to blow my own trumpet here, and Natalie is my witness. Natalie, how long have I been saying Perez is a great driver? Please tell me.
Since
we met. I mean, the first thing I said to you was,
what do you like about him so much?
I think he came into F1. He showed a lot of talent. Was he in Sauber and he nearly won a race? I think in Malaysia, and it was wet and he was flying, and then we went to McLaren and he
McLaren wasn't
but you
so
see,
hot.
it's the environment. It wasn't right for him, and McLaren wasn't in a good place then either. So
he still out-qualified Jensen more often than not.
Right, so there you go. I mean, he has what it takes.
Look at the podium finishers, Damon. All of them rejected by their teams last year or the year before. Yeah,
they were kind of the changeovers, weren't they? But ironic.
They were let go. They were let go.
I did say so. It's poetic, kind of seeing Perez and Sebastian up there on the podium together, and one of them's won the race. But both great drivers, and also experienced drivers, been around the block quite a few times. So it's really good to see them back on the podium. If they'd had Fernando Alonso up there as well, what a story that would be.
Vettel was quick to congratulate him. You saw him give him Perez a big hug.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Yeah,
everyone loves Perez.
They seem to, don't they?
And everyone loves Vettel. So an engineer was telling me over the weekend that Perez loves short radius corners, ones that are over before they've started, kind of thing. And that's what Baku is full of. And yet take him to Hungary, where you've got those long 180-degree turns where he can't deal with understeer, basically. Guys, tell me what you think, but Is this definitive? Has Perez fully arrived, or are we going to go to Paul Ricard in 2 weeks' time and find that actually he is still half a second off Max Verstappen?
I think it's a trend. I think it's a good trend. It's trending in the right direction. I think he's building strength and confidence, and the team are doing so in him as well. So I think it takes a while to jump into a new car, a new team, and find out how it works. I take your point.
And I think Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just saying, Natalie, it takes, I take your point. It is a unique-ish track in Baku, but I think we've seen flashes of his performance when he gets going in a race. He's not like some drivers who actually they qualify well. I'd say Valtteri qualifies well and then doesn't perform quite so well in the race, whereas Sergio doesn't typically, goes better in the race. So I think he learns a lot.
Andy Green, technical director of Aston Martin, said that Checo it's like he's got traction control in his bum / right foot. He said he's so brilliant at feeding in the power. He knows exactly where the limit is. And therefore it makes him, he doesn't overstress the tyre as a result. Why he's so good at...
Hence being so good with tyres.
Exactly.
Yes.
Traction control in your arse. That's what you need.
It's quite interesting with Perez because he is still keen to point out that this is a bloody difficult car to drive. I mean, he was looking quick all weekend, wasn't he? But you didn't necessarily predict he would take the victory. And obviously, right until the bitter end, you didn't think he would. But he was ready to pounce when it mattered and was very aggressive at that restart.
Yeah, he did.
And so solid. When he had Hamilton, right behind him all those laps, I felt he had the whole thing. I felt he had the whole thing under control.
Yeah.
Didn't feel he was about to make a mistake like a rookie. He was just Perez has arrived. He's got that confidence. So.
Yeah, he's one of those annoying drivers. I stuck behind Jarno Trulli once at the A1 ring, which is now the Red Bull ring, for an entire race. He didn't make a single mistake. I kept trying to get him to fumble the ball, and so Perez was like that with Lewis behind him, and Lewis, you could see he was thinking, he was running out of ideas. He was on the radio all the time saying, I can't stay with him in the middle sector, and he didn't have enough straight line speed. And so, Perez is experienced. He's calm in the cockpit, and in the race, he's very strong.
Yes, mate. Well done. Yes. Great job. Hey. That's a podium, man. That's a wrap. Thank you. Car was amazing today.
15th, 13th, 13th. That man's first 4 races with Aston Martin have now finally, he's turned a corner. Sebastian Vettel on the podium this weekend. The first podium for Aston Martin as a new iteration, would you call it that?
A new combination, maybe, a new arrival. He's slotted in. It's come since Monaco, I feel. Monaco, something like a penny dropped. I mean, he was coming. The signs were coming, but definitely in Monaco, he looked like he was a happy man in that car, and it's translated across to Baku. He didn't quite get through in qualifying, did he? Because they had the shunt at the end, so he didn't get his last run in. So he was a bit frustrated to not qualify. But of course, not getting into the top 10 gave him the opportunity of having his tyre strategy, which is the better tyre strategy, which then ultimately got him to second place.
And actually, you have to say his teammate, did incredibly well with that recovery drive until the tyre blowout. Lance Stroll was having a great race in Baku.
The car is good, isn't it? Clearly, they've made...
Which we weren't saying at the beginning of the year.
And nor were they. And then I think when the whole floor and change of regulations died down and they just thought we're going to have to knuckle down and sort this out, they're proving that actually they do have a good racing car. But taking it back to Seb, guys, what do you think? I'm going to say something that I think you'll probably disagree with, but I think Sebastian Vettel is happier now than he was at any period in his Ferrari career. I think this is the happiest Seb we've seen since 2013. What do you think? Discuss.
Certainly the most relaxed.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. He feels a little bit. I think that maybe he's coming out of a kind of dark spell, because he did have an awful lot of bad luck a few races back. But he's come out of this complicated mess that he found himself in Ferrari, where he'd left his home of Red Bull and then he'd gone to this new team and it was all looking great for a while, and then they had a number of changes at the top, didn't they, in Ferrari, and his plan didn't quite come off at Ferrari. So quite difficult to get to that point in your career and think to yourself, am I on the scrap heap? But he's clearly not. The old Seb has come alive again, I think, in the Aston Martin team.
But don't you think that about quite a few races this weekend, it was a real shot in the arm for a handful of races' careers? When you see Seb, you see Perez, you see Gasly up there on the podium, they were able to sort of silence the critics, really. And actually, it gave me a real sense of the talent that we've got on show. Up and down the grid, everywhere you look, there's brilliant drivers, brilliant racers who can still, at these sort of, stages of their career, deliver performances like that when it really matters most.
It's chemistry, isn't it, Natalie? I mean, you need the right people. You need to feel good in the environment you're in, and you need to feel like the people you're with are working with you. And you can see it so often in drivers. I mean, Gasly, of course, we mentioned that, he didn't seem to fit in with the big team at Red Bull, and he's gone back to his home team, and he's really shown a different kind of quality in that environment. And of course, we just mentioned Aston Martin and Seb. And Seb, I felt there was this kind of wobbly period at the start where he maybe felt, oh my goodness me, what is this going to be like? And the car wasn't looking so good in the test in Bahrain and so forth. But things are starting to pick up, and the chemistry seems to be right. It seems to be good. They had a different power unit. Did they all the Merc guys have fresher power units?
Correct.
They did. So that may have been. It's always nice to get a bit more horsepower. So he probably felt a bit better about that. But the car generally looked more competitive, didn't it, than it had done.
But on the subject of Gasly, and you say he didn't fit in with the big team, and he's now doing a fantastic job with AlphaTauri. Do you guys think you get drivers who are small team drivers? I remember thinking Giancarlo Fisichella, brilliant in a small team. Put him in the pressured environment of a Renault alongside Fernando Alonso when they were winning world championships, and he just never quite hit his stride. I think Gasly's a wonderful racing driver, but I wonder if he is a small team driver. He loves being the big fish in the small pond.
Well, he went on record as saying that he just didn't feel like he got the support that he needed in Red Bull. And there's others that can attest to that it is Max Verstappen's team, and he's moulded them very well around him. And Gasly probably felt slightly out in the cold, and he whether it's a small team or just a connected team and one that's prepared to offer its support. I don't know, because I don't know the inner workings of Red Bull, but he was quite keen to point that out.
It's very difficult to get a team that provides the same level of comfort to both drivers. I've always felt there's definitely a yin-yang thing going on in teams. If one driver's up, all the energy of the team goes to that driver, and then if to actually turn that back in your direction is very, very hard. But if you can do it, it's like water in a bathtub. It all slops to one end again. It's kind of you playing this fight all the time for the energy in the team, and you to stay on top and keep it all going your way means you have to beat your teammate. And so I don't know how you ever get a level continuum. It is
such a good point. It's a brilliant point, because it's about the hearts and minds of all the team members as well. You want to really immerse yourself in that team and make them work for you as much as you for them as a driver. We saw it in Mercedes,
didn't it, with Nico? Yeah. There was battles over mechanics. And eventually there was one year where they swapped the mechanics over so Lewis got Nico's mechanics and vice versa to try and level it out. I don't know if it's so you'll get factions within the team, and that's the job of the top man, the Toto or the Christian, to stop that. And I get the sense with Red Bull, Christian and Helmut Marko and the sponsors and everything, they're all absolutely wedded to Max, and so it's very difficult to move in on that patch, I think, and feel comfortable, which is what Sergio is having to do now. But I think that's where his experience is he's a bit thicker skinned, and he's able to cope with that.
Yeah, he's just at a different stage of his career, isn't he?
If Gasly, doing a fantastic job, got the opportunity to go back to the big team, do you think the outcome would be any different with 2, 3, however many years more experience he has? Or do you think they would just revert straight back to how it was?
I think it's purely hypothetical, because it's not going to happen. Christian's made that very clear, hasn't he? But yeah, go on then, let's play the game.
No, I think it will eventually for Pierre, because I think Pierre's got that. He has got that slightly, star quality to him. He's definitely showing that. I think that I think I can see Gasly having an opportunity in a top team. Maybe not necessarily Red Bull, because Max is there. Max could be there for the next 20 years. As long as the team are competitive. So I think that where to go, and having to oblige. We haven't mentioned George Russell. I mean, he's been making noises about moving up. I'm ready to win a championship. Where's he going to go? That's the whole musical chairs problem with Formula One is a real thing, and sometimes young drivers have to be patient. Look how long Sergio's had to wait. He's been up, he's been down, he's been going along, and now he's back in a really great position. It does come to can come to fruition. Sebastian Vettel. I mean, how old is Sebastian Vettel? He's only 31 or 2, isn't he? He's not. No.
33.
33. Well, I didn't start in Formula 1 until I was 33. So and I want to. Yeah. So there's more championships out there for Seb, and maybe a championship out there for Sergio Perez. I mean, definitely, Pierre Gasly is going to have to be patient. This is the hard thing in this sport, is being patient when you're young.
Under pressure now, Pierre Gasly's got Charles Leclerc right behind him. Looks like Charles Leclerc is ahead of Pierre Gasly. Leclerc goes back up into the podium places. He started on pole, he may yet finish on the podium. Gasly's going to come back at him again though. The AlphaTauri goes a bit deep and gets past.
I loved seeing that battle between Gasly and Leclerc in the closing. Wasn't that fantastic?
Balletic.
Two mates from when they were really small, just going hard like they were karting again. And Gasly, with that engine problem, he was down on power, somehow managing to keep Charles at bay. It was fantastic.
That was brilliant racing.
But let's have 2-lap races from now on. Just a bunch of them.
When we run Formula One. There was a funny moment in the post-race press conference in Baku, because before the cameras came on, the first thing that both Checo and Pierre wanted to know from Sebastian wasn't about the car, about the race. It was, why didn't you get out of the car during the red flag period? And Seb went, well, I just wanted to stay in the zone. And they said, yeah, but didn't you need to go to the loo? And he went, well, if I needed to go to the loo, I can... And they went, no one actually does that. No one actually pees in their car. And he said, well, anyway, I didn't need to go, so it was fine. But
loads of them pee in the car. Jensen's admitted that to me. Damon, come on. Johnny told me that as well.
DH, now's your moment. Nat and I want to know.
I'm extremely proud to announce that I have never peed in a racing car. I sat on the grid in Spa in '98 for an hour, and it was tipping down, and we
poo.
Yeah, I've crapped myself a few times. No, so you can cut that out.
So did you not get out of the car? Did you not get out of the car at Spa? You did what
exactly.
We now call
I didn't know how long it was
Sebastian.
going to take, and it was going on and on. Eventually, I'm going. I'm dying for a pee now. I wish I could. I'm convinced that the more you want to go, the quicker you get off the line.
But the thing is, right? Imagine trying to pee at 200 miles an hour. That would be a challenge. I'm not sure I could do that.
Well, I've never. I think that's not on your mind when you're actually moving. I think that's the theory behind it. Is that actually once you're racing, you forget all about all that, and so you're kind of, and yeah.
Let's get a warm, wet leg.
Do you know what we've forgotten? We've forgotten that Ferrari was on pole position. I mean, there was such a lot in the race. We actually forgot that actually we might have been talking about Ferrari or Leclerc having his second pole position on the trot, which unfortunately didn't materialise into anything in the race.
But how ironic as well that it was his teammates' crash this time that prevented anyone else from bettering it.
Yes, well, that kind of put to bed that argument as to whether or not it was, it's a method to keep pole position, which we don't like that
Pinks,
thought,
Pinks.
do we?
I'm going to have to pick you up on that, Pinks. I know.
Go on. Well, it was Yuki.
And I know you like
Yuki. It was
Yuki, so you're never going to blame Yuki, but it was Yuki, wasn't it?
Okay, it was Yuki and Carlos.
And also,
Carlito.
I know you want to talk about Yuki Tsunoda, Pinks, but before we move on from Ferrari, I never thought they were going to win that race. Even with Charles on pole, I don't know what you guys thought, but it seemed to me it was a slightly fluky run in Q3. They had low downforce, so it was always going to struggle. They were always going to struggle with tyre wear in the race. He got a wonderful tow from Lewis Hamilton, and it all came together for that first run in Q3. But Leclerc bangs it in now every weekend. He's Mr. Consistent. Who's better in Formula One than Charles Leclerc?
Lewis Hamilton.
Do you think?
I mean, I'm only going with him that because he's got credentials. I mean, he hasn't won a world championship, Charles Leclerc, yet. But I mean, there's so many really, really good drivers. It's going to get very difficult to pick through these guys because.
Pinks, who's better than Charles Leclerc in Formula One? I would say.
Max Verstappen.
Do you think so? I would say I don't think there's anyone better. I think there's three drivers right on the top level: Charles, Max, Lewis.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, Tom. Yeah.
What really excited me about this weekend was just how much talent there is out there. That at any stage of a Grand Prix, when things go wrong, there are drivers capable to seize those opportunities when they present themselves. And that was really invigorating as a fan of the sport, is that I was just so pleased to see such a mixed up podium. It told me that the talent is everywhere you look, up and down that grid. Hugely talented drivers, and so it should be.
We've got talent. We got lots of great racers, and we saw some great racing in the actual Baku Grand Prix, especially after the restart with Fernando Alonso's wicked kind of outmanoeuvring to get himself up another couple of places as well, and some good. Yuki Tsunoda as well did a fantastic job to keep out of trouble and also make progress.
And I loved the fact that, whilst it was his best result in Formula One, he still felt he could and should have done more. Go the Yuki. Damon, it's that time again.
It's the time to ask me awkward questions that I have to think up brilliant answers to on the spot. Is that the time?
It's Ask Damon.
Hi Damon, my name is Ronita from Indonesia. I want to ask you a question. Is there any particular technology or feature available now on the current F1 cars that you wish you had when you were still racing and might change the outcome of the race? Thank you.
Good question.
Ronita, yeah, that is a good question. Actually, I'd never thought about that, because actually what I think you're saying is, if, are there any of the toys that they have in F1, things I'd like to have played with? I think that the cars themselves are an overall package, so it's quite difficult to pick one thing out of them. I don't think I'd like to have the steering wheel they currently have and have to do all these calculations and what knobs to change and stuff. I mean, I was quite lucky in my career. I had active suspension and power assisted brakes, and at one point we had quite a lot of the car automated and under my control if I wanted it to. I think thinking about it, probably power steering is the thing that I would probably like to have had more of when I was racing. But the acceleration and the power they have and the downforce must have been would be something that would be mind-blowing to have experienced. I think these cars are so much quicker. You look at the pictures of them now on the track, and I can't believe how quick they are. I think that sometimes it looks like the pictures have been speeded up. So overall, the whole car is quite an appealing step up in performance from when I was racing. But I can't think. I'm trying to think of one good answer of one particular thing that I could have picked out. I suppose it would have to be the halo. Yeah, because I mean that's a lifesaver. I didn't need it, but some people did when I was racing. So yeah, halo probably would have been good.
Come on, brake magic. Is it for you?
Would I have wanted brake magic? Well, only if I was going to the grid and not going to the first corner. I don't think that doesn't seem to be working, does it? When it's actually in a race.
Depends
too many
on your
knobs.
fingers and thumbs.
There's too many things to think about. I don't know how they cope. I mean, there's so many blooming settings on this car. My simple mind would not have been able to cope with these modern formulas. We had a radio and a drinks button. There was a button which we had once, which was subsequently made obsolete, because you basically press the button as you come into a corner and it just changes down for you. And Renault had set it up. I went to the first test of the year. Had a lovely Christmas. We come out and first test, go down the straight, press this button. As I go into the corner, they'd forgot to set the rev bar. So instead of it changing down when the car had slowed down enough, it just kept changing down. So the engine revs went up and up and up and up, and eventually the engine blew up and spat me off the road. And I thought I'd hit the self-destruct button or something. I just my first lap, first corner, first time in the car since Christmas, hit this button, it goes explode and I crash. I thought, what have I done? I only pressed that little yellow button on the left hand side, and I thought, was I not supposed to do that? Anyway, that
was the magic button.
That was the magic self-destruct button.
Okay, next question.
Hi Damon. I once sat next to Jacques Villeneuve on a red-eye flight from Montreal to London, and he was reading some kind of fantasy or sci-fi novel. What is your preferred reading matter? And can you suggest some books that today's drivers ought to be reading?
Hi Chris. So I always suspected that the person next to me on the aeroplane was looking over my shoulder to check out what I was reading, but I'm not surprised that Jacques was reading some sort of fantasy sci-fi book, because he loved his kind of sci-fi. He used to do this thing called played a game called Dungeons and Dragons, or some computer game. I think it was. I don't know what it was. I didn't get into it, but so he liked all of that. I obviously. I've got a degree in literature, but I don't read. I don't read Dostoevsky on aeroplanes so much anymore. But
you're no Danny Kvyat, are you?
No, he probably reads it in the original Russian as well, so he's able to. I mean, there's so good books. Sometimes you read to escape, don't you? And other times you read to learn. I tend now to. I've switched. I've gone over to the more visual things, and I like to watch documentaries, particularly sport documentaries. I'm reading The Plague, which is kind of like topical at the moment, isn't it?
I thought you'd be champing at the bit to tell us that we all need to read. What was it? Watching the Wheel or something? Or what was your book called?
A good book to read. Yeah, no, my book was called Watching the Wheels. You don't want to read that. I mean, there's people out there who want to read it. They should read it.
Chris, I've read it. It's a good read, and you'll both find it an escape, and you'll learn stuff as well.
The Homer's, what was Homer's first book?
The Iliad.
The Iliad. That's it. Thank you, Tom. The Iliad's got a great scene in it, which is a chariot race. And I always thought it'd be brilliant, and I missed my opportunity, and I'm forever kicking myself. I will have to kick myself for this. But I wanted to get Murray Walker to record the chariot race in the Iliad, which would have been great.
That would have been gold.
I'm sadly missed that, and we'll never get him back again.
DH.
So maybe Tom, you can do this for us.
DH, you are podcast gold. You are podcast. So Chris has said, Damon, can you suggest a book for your fellow F1 drivers? And you have actually just suggested the Iliad. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's full of daring do and exciting bravery and fights and arguments. It's a good book. It's obviously a bit old now, but it's the thing is, nothing much has changed, has it? It's a bit like F1. Wonderful. I'd love to hear more of these questions. They're very interesting. They make me think quite a lot, actually. Some very interesting angles people come from. And so more of that, please. If you just record your voicemail message to askdamonhill@gmail.com, and we'll play them. And I'll try and answer them.
Before we go, we haven't mentioned McLaren. Lando Norris finishing 5th and Daniel Ricciardo 9th. Really solid weekend for them in Baku. But, I mean, Damon, it was a tough weekend for McLaren, though, when news broke that Mansour Ogier, one of their shareholders, passed away at the age of 68. Such an instrumental part of that team, wasn't he?
He was, and I'm not sure quite how much fans realised how important he was to the McLaren story. I mean, he really was the brains, in many ways, and the powerhouse behind McLaren's fantastic years with Senna and Prost, and he'd been there from the very beginning. So, and a genuinely lovely guy. I didn't have the good fortune to work with him. I just knew him socially at occasional sporting events, because I was racing with the competition, which was Williams. So I was never really inside the McLaren camp. But him and his wife, they were always lovely people, and very sad loss for McLaren team and the people that knew him.
And Damon, as you say, you were a rival, yet he was so sporting. He always got in touch with rivals, congratulated people when they won if it wasn't a McLaren. I mean, Christian Horner said at the weekend that whenever Red Bull won a race, Mansour always used to text him to congratulate him, which is a mark of the man, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he was one of those big people who were behind the scenes, and only the people who were really involved in the sport got to know who he was. I don't think he wanted the limelight. He was quite happy to sit back and see all the fruits of his planning and investment come to fruition.
What a weekend. What a race to reflect on.
Yeah, and it's another lay week, isn't it, DH? So no Formula One this coming weekend, but then we've got the triple header coming up. The first...
Bang, coming thick and fast.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to cope.
F1 Nation is produced by F1
in association with Audio Boom. Thanks very much for listening, everyone, and see you next week.